A simple act of kindness between strangers becomes a life-changing moment that reveals how the smallest gestures can ripple across time in ways we never imagine. When Staff Sergeant Maya Chen notices a hungry child in a hospital cafeteria, her decision to share her meal sets in motion a chain of events that will challenge everything she believes about sacrifice, purpose, and the invisible threads that connect us all. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with nothing more than an offered sandwich. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The fluorescent lights in the hospital cafeteria hummed like dying insects, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional green that made food look like medicine and medicine look like food. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen sat alone at a corner table, her desert camouflage uniform crisp despite the 18-hour flight from Kandahar that had ended 4 hours ago. She hadn't changed clothes yet, hadn't gone home, hadn't called her mother. The sandwich sat untouched on the plastic tray before her turkey, Swiss, lettuce that had seen better days. Her stomach gnawed at itself, but her hands remained folded in her lap, trembling slightly. A tremor she'd developed 3 months ago, after the convoy. She watched people move through the cafeteria like ghosts, nurses grabbing coffee between shifts, doctors wolfing down salads while scrolling through phones, families clustering around tables with the particular quiet that comes with long waits and uncertain news. Maya had been one of those families once. 15 years old, sitting in this same cafeteria, watching her father disappear piece by piece in room 314 upstairs. Cancer, they'd said. 6 months, they'd said. He'd made it 4. "Excuse me, miss?" Maya looked up. A man stood beside her table mid-50s, wearing the navy blue uniform of hospital maintenance. His name tag read, Carlos. His hands were clean but calloused, and his eyes held the particular weariness of someone who'd been invisible for so long he'd almost forgotten he existed. "I'm sorry to bother you," Carlos continued, his accent soft, careful. "But my son," he gestured toward the food line where a boy, maybe 8 years old, stood staring at the sandwich display with the focused intensity of hunger. "He's been here since yesterday. His grandmother, she's in surgery, 2nd time this week, and the vending machines, they're expensive, and," Maya followed his gaze. The boy wore a school uniform that had seen too many washes, his backpack patched with duct tape. He wasn't crying, wasn't making a scene, just standing there looking at food he couldn't have. She knew that look. "Please," Carlos said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I get paid tomorrow, but today," Maya picked up her sandwich, stood, walked to the boy before Carlos could finish his sentence. "Hey," she said, crouching to the boy's eye level. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his young face, the way he held himself too still, too controlled for someone his age. "What's your name?" "Miguel," he said, looking at her uniform, then at her face. "Are you a soldier?" "I am. And soldiers look out for each other, right?" She held out the sandwich. "This is way too big for me. Think you could help me out?" Miguel looked at the sandwich, then at his father, who had followed them over. Carlos started to speak, but Maya held up a hand. "It's just a sandwich," she said, still looking at Miguel. "But I bet you're hungry enough to make it disappear." The boy's face transformed, not just with relief, but with something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that sometimes strangers become angels, and angels sometimes wear combat boots. "Thank you," Miguel whispered, taking the sandwich with both hands as if it were made of glass. Maya stood, turned to Carlos. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know how to—" "You don't need to." Maya reached into her pocket, pulled out a $20 bill. "For later. For whatever you need." Carlos stared at the money like it was a foreign concept. "I can't. You can, and you will. Because that's what we do." Maya looked back at Miguel, who had already taken a substantial bite of the sandwich. "Take care of each other." She walked back to her table, gathered her things. The cafeteria felt different, now less like a waiting room for grief, more like a place where small miracles happened between the vending machines and the hand sanitizer dispensers. As she headed for the exit, she heard Miguel's voice behind her. "Papa, why did the soldier lady help us?" Carlos's answer was soft but clear. "Because some people see us, Maijo, even when we think we're invisible." Maya pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot, where the afternoon sun felt like a blessing after months of desert heat and fluorescent cold. She sat in her car for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Her phone buzzed. A text from her commanding officer. "Welcome home, Chen. Take your time, take your time." When was the last time someone had said that to her? When was the last time she'd had time to take? She thought about Miguel's face when she'd offered the sandwich. No suspicion, no adult wariness, just a child accepting kindness because it was offered freely. When had she stopped believing in that kind of simplicity? The convoy. 3 months ago. The roadside bomb that had taken Rodriguez and Williams and left her with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and dreams that wouldn't stop burning. She'd come to the hospital because it was neutral ground. Because her apartment felt too small and her mother's house felt too full of questions she wasn't ready to answer. Because sometimes you needed to remember what you were fighting for, and sometimes that meant watching other people's wars play out in antiseptic hallways and cafeteria chairs. Maya started the engine, but instead of driving home, she found herself pulling back into a parking space. Through the cafeteria windows, she could see Carlos working, pushing a mop bucket between the tables. Miguel sat in the corner where she'd been sitting, doing homework, taking careful bites of the sandwich to make it last. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts, until she found the number for the hospital's volunteer coordinator. She'd done volunteer work before, in high school, after her father died. Maybe it was time to do it again. Children's Hospital Volunteer Services, this is Jennifer. "Hi, Jennifer. My name is Maya Chen. I'm wondering about volunteering opportunities, particularly in pediatrics." "Oh, wonderful. Are you available for an orientation next week?" Maya watched Carlos straighten chairs, watched Miguel write in a composition notebook with the focused determination of a child who'd learned that homework was a constant regardless of where you had to do it. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." That evening, Maya finally went home to her apartment. It felt exactly as small as she'd remembered, but somehow less suffocating. She microwaved a frozen dinner, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and called her mother. "Mija, you're home." Her mother's voice carried across the phone line like an embrace. "How are you?" "I'm okay, Mom. Different, but okay." Different how? Maya looked out her window at the city lights. At the hospital in the distance where Carlos was probably finishing his shift and Miguel was probably falling asleep in a chair next to his grandmother's bed. "I think I remembered something. Today." "What's that?" "Why I became a soldier in the first place." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you coming for dinner tomorrow?" "Yeah, Mom, I'll be there." After she hung up, Maya sat on her couch and opened her laptop. She Googled Carlos Ramirez Hospital Maintenance, but found nothing useful. She tried Miguel Ramirez Children's Hospital and came up empty. They were just 2 people she'd met for 5 minutes in a cafeteria, and already they felt essential to something she couldn't name. She closed the laptop and went to bed, and for the first time in 3 months, she slept without dreaming of convoys or explosions or the faces of soldiers who wouldn't be coming home. Instead, she dreamed of a small boy carefully eating a sandwich, making it last, and his father pushing a mop with the dignity of someone who understood that all work was good work if it fed your family. When she woke up, her hands weren't shaking. 3 weeks later, Maya found herself in the pediatric ward wearing a volunteer badge and pushing a cart full of books through hallways that smelled like antiseptic and hope. The orientation had been thorough background checks, training sessions, rules about patient privacy and professional boundaries. But nothing had prepared her for the weight of walking into rooms where children fought battles that would have broken grown men. Room 217, leukemia, age 6. Room 219, cystic fibrosis, age 12. Room 221, car accident, age 4, touch and go. Maya knocked softly on the door of room 223. "Come in," a small voice called. She pushed the cart inside and stopped. Miguel sat cross-legged on the hospital bed, still in his school uniform, reading a worn paperback copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. His grandmother lay in the adjacent bed, tubes and wires creating a fragile web around her sleeping form. "Maya?" Miguel's face lit up with recognition. "The soldier lady?" "Just Maya now," she said, moving the cart closer. "I'm a volunteer here. What are you reading?" "It's about dogs," Miguel said, holding up the book. "Billy wants hunting dogs so bad, but his family doesn't have money. So he works and saves every penny for 2 years. Maya sat in the chair beside his bed. 2 years is a long time to wait for something you want. Abuela says good things come to people who wait. Miguel glanced at his grandmother. She's been waiting 3 days to wake up. The machines around the bed beeped steadily, marking time in mechanical heartbeats. Maya had heard those sounds before, in field hospitals, in her father's room 15 years ago, the sound of bodies refusing to surrender. Your dad working today? Night shift. He'll be here at 7. Miguel closed the book, keeping his finger between the pages to mark his place. Are you going to read to the kids? That's what the other volunteers do. That's the plan. Want to help me? Miguel's eyes widened. I can do that? Why not? You're already reading. Might as well make it useful. They spent the next hour going room to room. Miguel read picture books to the younger children with the patient cadence of someone who'd been read to often. Maya watched him transform from a worried grandson into something else, a bridge between the world of healthy children and the kingdom of the sick. In room 219, Sarah, the 12-year-old with cystic fibrosis, listened to Miguel read The Giving Tree and whispered, "He's good at this." In room 221, the 4-year-old who'd been in the car accident couldn't speak because of the breathing tube, but his eyes followed Miguel's voice like it was a lifeline. You're a natural, Maya told him as they returned to his grandmother's room. My dad reads to me every night, Miguel said, even when he's tired from work. He says stories are like medicine, but they taste better. Maya helped him back onto his bed. His grandmother stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Abuela? Miguel leaned forward. The woman's eyes opened slowly, focusing on her grandson's face. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, but her words were clear. Mijo. You're here. I'm always here, Abuela. She turned her head slightly, saw Maya. Who? This is Maya, Miguel said. She's the soldier who gave me the sandwich. Remember? Papa told you. The woman's eyes sharpened with understanding. She tried to sit up, and Maya moved quickly to help her, adjusting the pillows behind her back. Thank you, the woman whispered. Elena Ramirez. Maya Chen. Elena studied her with the focused attention of someone who'd learned to read people quickly and accurately. You came back. I volunteer here now. No, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. You came back for Miguel. Maya felt something shift in her chest, not uncomfortable but unfamiliar. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement of something she hadn't admitted to herself. Maybe I did. Elena smiled, and Maya could see where Miguel got his resilience, his capacity to find light in dark places. Carlos will want to thank you properly, Elena said, when he gets here. He doesn't need to thank me for anything. No, Elena agreed, but he will anyway. It's who he is. At 7 o'clock, Carlos appeared in the doorway, still in his maintenance uniform, carrying a small bouquet of grocery store flowers and a plastic bag that smelled like home cooking. Mama, he said, moving to Elena's bedside. Then he saw Maya and stopped. You're here. I volunteer here now, Maya said, standing. I should go. Let you have family time. Wait, Carlos said. He set down the flowers and the bag, pulled out a chair. Please. Stay. Maya looked at Miguel, who nodded encouragingly. Okay. For a few minutes. Carlos opened the plastic bag and produced a container of rice and beans, another of what looked like homemade tamales. From our neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She heard Mama was awake and insisted. He looked at Maya. There's enough for everyone. I couldn't. You could, Elena said from the bed. And you should. They ate hospital food with plastic forks, while Elena told stories about Miguel's childhood, about Carlos's late wife, about the small apartment where they lived, with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and enough love to fill a mansion. Maya found herself talking about her father, about the long nights in this same hospital, about how grief could hollow you out until you forgot you were supposed to be solid. "And after he died?" Elena asked. "I enlisted. Figured if I was going to fight something, might as well fight for something that mattered. And now?" Maya looked at Miguel, who was drawing in the margins of his homework, occasionally glancing up at the conversation. "Now I'm not sure what I'm fighting for anymore." "Maybe," Carlos said quietly, "you're fighting for the same thing you always were. You just forgot what it looked like." At 8 o'clock, visiting hours ended. Maya gathered her things, said her goodbyes. As she reached the door, Miguel called her name. "Maya?" She turned back. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "I'm scheduled for Thursday." "I mean here, to see us." Maya looked at the 3 generations of the Ramirez family, Elena propped up in bed, looking more alert than she had all day. Carlos organizing containers of food, with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste anything. Miguel sitting cross-legged with his homework, but watching her with eyes that held no expectations, only hope. "Yeah," she said. "I'll come back tomorrow." That night, Maya called her mother. "You sound different," her mother said. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you remember how to breathe." Maya was quiet for a moment, standing at her window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Carlos was probably helping Miguel with homework while Elena slept. Somewhere out there, children were healing, and families were waiting, and people were taking care of each other in ways both large and small. "I met a family," Maya said finally. "Tell me about them." So Maya did. She told her mother about the sandwich, about Miguel's reading voice, about Elena's fierce intelligence and Carlos's quiet dignity. She told her about the way grief could become a bridge instead of a wall, about how sometimes the people you're meant to help end up helping you instead. "They sound special," her mother said. "They are, but I think maybe they're not unique. I think maybe there are families like them everywhere, and I just never learned how to see them. And now you do?" Maya watched a plane cross the sky, its lights blinking steadily against the darkness. Someone was going home. Someone was leaving. Someone was starting over. Now I'm learning. The next day, Maya arrived at the hospital during her lunch break. She found Miguel in the family lounge, doing homework at a table covered with get-well cards from his classmates. "Where's your grandmother?" Maya asked. "Physical therapy," Miguel said without looking up from his math worksheet. "Papa's with her. They're teaching her to walk again." Maya sat across from him. "How's school?" "Hard. I missed a lot of days." Miguel erased something, rewrote it. "My teacher says I might have to repeat 3rd grade. What do you think about that?" Miguel shrugged, but Maya could see the disappointment in the set of his shoulders, the way he pressed too hard with his pencil. "Want some help?" she asked. For the next hour, Maya worked through fraction problems with Miguel. Watched him struggle with concepts that seemed simple until you remembered what it was like to be 8 years old and trying to make sense of numbers that refused to stay whole. "I'm not smart like the other kids," Miguel said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Says who?" "Says everyone. I'm always behind. Always missing school because of Abuela, or because Papa needs help with something, or because—" He gestured vaguely at the hospital around them. Maya thought about the convoy, about the split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death, about the way training could prepare you for anything except the moment when preparation wasn't enough. "You know what I think?" she said. Miguel looked up from his worksheet. "I think smart comes in different shapes, and I think you're the kind of smart that knows how to take care of people. That's not the kind of smart they test for in school, but it might be the most important kind there is." Miguel considered this, twirling his pencil between his fingers. "My papa says the same thing. Your papa's a wise man." "Maya?" Miguel's voice was smaller now, more hesitant. "What if Abuela doesn't get better? What if she has to come back to the hospital again?" Maya set down her pen, looked at this boy who was carrying questions too heavy for his small shoulders. Then you'll handle it, the same way you've been handling it. One day at a time, with people who love you. She paused. And maybe with friends who want to help. Are we friends? The question was so direct, so without pretense, that Maya felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had asked her that? When was the last time friendship had felt like a choice instead of a convenience? Yeah, Miguel, we're friends. 2 months later, Maya received the call at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. She'd been awake since 5, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee and case files from her new job at the Veterans Affairs Office, a position she'd taken after deciding that fixing broken systems might be more useful than participating in them. The phone rang just as she was reviewing a disability claim for a Marine who'd lost his hearing in Fallujah. Maya? It's Carlos. His voice was tight with controlled panic, the sound of someone trying not to fall apart while the world collapsed around him. What's wrong? It's Miguel. There was an accident. We're at Children's Hospital, but they're saying they want to transfer him to University Medical. Something about specialists and equipment and... His voice broke. Can you come, please? Maya was already reaching for her keys. I'm on my way. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and early morning traffic. Maya's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Miguel was supposed to be in school. What kind of accident happened at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday? She found Carlos in the emergency department family waiting room, still in his maintenance uniform from the night shift he'd never finished. His hands were shaking as he held a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Carlos? He looked up, and Maya saw 20 years of careful composure crumble in an instant. She sat beside him, and he fell against her shoulder like a man who'd forgotten how to hold himself upright. He was walking to school, Carlos whispered. Early, because he wanted to get there before first period for math help. The crossing guard wasn't there yet, and the car driver said the sun was in his eyes. He didn't see Miguel until Maya held him while he shook, this man who'd spent his life being invisible, being strong, being everything his family needed him to be. Around them, the waiting room hummed with its familiar rhythm of hope and terror. Where's Elena? Maya asked. Home. She doesn't know yet. I couldn't do I tell her that the boy she raised, the boy who reads to her every night. He pulled back, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. They're saying surgery. Multiple fractures in his leg, possible internal bleeding. They want to move him to University Medical because they have better pediatric trauma facilities. A nurse appeared beside them. Mr. Ramirez? Dr. Patterson would like to speak with you. Carlos stood on unsteady legs. Maya rose with him. You don't have to, he started. Yes, I do. Dr. Patterson was younger than Maya had expected, with the particular combination of confidence and exhaustion that marked emergency medicine physicians. She spoke in measured tones about compound fractures and surgical procedures, about the golden hour and the advantage of youth in trauma recovery. The good news, she said, is that Miguel was conscious when the paramedics arrived. He asked for his papa and his abuela, and he asked if someone could call the soldier lady who volunteers here. The paramedic thought he might be delirious, but... That's me, Maya said. I'm the soldier lady. Dr. Patterson smiled for the first time since they'd started talking. Well, then I'd say Miguel's head is exactly where it should be. That's a very good sign. They transferred Miguel to University Medical in an ambulance, Carlos riding with him while Maya followed in her car. At red lights, she found herself praying to gods she wasn't sure she believed in, making bargains with the universe that she had no authority to make. Let him be okay. Let him keep his leg. Let him walk again. Let him grow up to read to his own children. Let him forgive me for not being there when it happened. The last thought surprised her with its intensity. When had Miguel's welfare become so entangled with her own sense of purpose that his pain felt like her failure? At University Medical they waited. Carlos called Elena, and Maya listened to him break his mother-in-law's heart with gentle words and careful omissions. Elena insisted on coming to the hospital despite her own recent discharge, despite the fact that she could barely walk the length of her apartment without assistance. She raised him while I worked double shifts, Carlos explained after he hung up. After Maria died, Elena moved in to help. Miguel is as much her child as mine. Maya thought about families, about the way they formed and reformed around love and necessity, about how biology was just one way to claim someone as your own. Elena arrived an hour later in a taxi she couldn't afford, moving carefully with a walker, but moving nonetheless. She took one look at Carlos's face and opened her arms. "Mijo," she said, and he fell into her embrace like a child. They waited through morning and into afternoon. Maya called in sick to work, brought coffee and sandwiches that no one ate, made conversation that filled the space between updates from surgical staff. At 3:20 p.m., Dr. Kim emerged from the OR in scrubs that had seen better days. "The surgery went well," she said, and Maya felt Carlos sag with relief beside her. "We were able to repair the fractures with pins and plates. There was some internal bleeding, but nothing we couldn't handle. He's going to have a long recovery, several months of physical therapy, possibly more surgeries as he grows, but there's no reason he shouldn't make a full recovery." "Can we see him?" Elena asked. "He's in recovery now. Give us another hour. And then, yes, fair warning, he's going to be groggy and uncomfortable for a while. But the hard part is over." They waited another hour. Maya called her mother, explained the situation, listened to maternal wisdom about the bonds we choose and the families we find. She called her supervisor at the VA, arranged to work from the hospital for the rest of the week. When they finally brought Miguel up from recovery, he looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines and wires and the cast that ran from his hip to his ankle. But his eyes were clear when they opened, and the first thing he said was, "Papa, did I miss my math test?" Carlos laughed and cried simultaneously. "No, mijo, you didn't miss anything important." Miguel's gaze found Maya in the corner of the room. "You came." "Of course I came. The paramedic said I was talking about a soldier lady, and he thought I was seeing things because of my head getting bumped." "Your head is fine," Maya said, moving closer to the bed. "A little hard maybe, but fine." Miguel smiled, the same transformation Maya remembered from the cafeteria months ago. "Will you read to me?" "My eyes feel heavy, but I don't want to sleep yet." Maya looked at the bag Elena had brought from home, pulled out the worn copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. "Where did you leave off?" "Billy just got his dogs, Old Dan and Little Ann." Maya opened the book, found the page, began to read about a boy and his dogs, and the way love could drive you to impossible feats of determination. Miguel's eyes drifted closed after 10 minutes, but his breathing was steady, peaceful. Carlos and Elena sat on either side of the bed, each holding one of Miguel's hands. Maya closed the book and started to leave, but Elena's voice stopped her. "Sit," the older woman said. "Your family now." Maya wanted to protest, to explain about professional boundaries and the difference between volunteers and relatives, about the way she'd stumbled into their lives by accident and didn't want to overstep. Instead, she sat. They kept vigil through the night. Carlos dozed in the reclining chair beside Miguel's bed. Elena sat upright in her wheelchair, occasionally reaching out to smooth Miguel's hair or adjust his blanket. Maya stayed in the corner, watching over all of them with the hypervigilance of someone trained to look for threats in every shadow. At 2 a.m., Miguel stirred, opened his eyes. "Maya?" "Right here. I had a dream about the dogs, Old Dan and Little Ann. They were hunting, but they weren't trying to catch anything. They were just running because they loved to run." "That sounds like a good dream." "Yeah." Miguel's voice was getting sleepy again. "Maya?" "Yeah?" "When I get better, will you teach me to be brave like you?" Maya looked at this boy who'd spent months caring for his grandmother, who'd faced down surgery with questions about math tests, who'd asked a paramedic to call a friend he'd known for 3 months. "Miguel," she said softly, "I think you could teach me a thing or two about being brave." 6 weeks later, Maya sat in the physical therapy department at University Medical, watching Miguel navigate parallel bars with the focused determination of someone who decided that walking was not optional but inevitable. "Come on, Mijo," Elena called from her wheelchair beside the bars. 5 more steps. Miguel's face was tight with concentration and pain, but he moved forward one careful step at a time. The physical therapist, a woman named Sarah who'd worked with trauma patients for 15 years, spotted him without hovering, her hands ready but not intrusive. "That's it," Sarah said. "Feel how your weight shifts. Trust your leg to hold you. Trust." Maya had been thinking about that word a lot lately. Trust in legs that had been shattered and rebuilt. Trust in bodies that had betrayed you. Trust in people who showed up day after day without being asked. "Maya, look," Miguel called out, his voice bright with triumph. "I made it to the end." "I see that, pretty impressive." Carlos appeared in the doorway, still in his work uniform but carrying a bag from the bakery down the street. His shifts had been adjusted so he could be here for Miguel's afternoon sessions, accommodation the hospital administration had made after Maya had quietly spoken to someone she knew in human resources. "How did he do today?" Carlos asked Sarah. "Excellent progress. The bone is healing well, and his range of motion is improving ahead of schedule. I think we can start talking about going home soon." Home. Miguel had been at University Medical for 6 weeks, and Maya had been there almost as much as Carlos and Elena. She'd moved a card table into Miguel's room and worked on VA cases while he napped. She'd read him through the rest of Where the Red Fern Grows and started on Bridge to Terabithia. She'd learned to navigate the hospital cafeteria's dinner offerings and could identify which vending machines had the freshest coffee. More importantly, she'd learned that healing was not a linear process. There had been setback SAN infection that required additional antibiotics, a night when Miguel's pain medication wasn't enough and he cried for his mother, a day when the physical therapy hurt so much that he refused to get out of bed. Maya had been there for all of it. Not because she was obligated to be, but because somewhere along the way, the Ramirez family had become her family too. "When you say home," Maya asked Sarah, "what does that look like? What kind of support will he need?" "Physical therapy 3 times a week for at least another month, possibly longer. Help with stairs. Their apartment is on the 3rd floor, right? Some modifications to make things easier while he builds back his full strength." Maya looked at Carlos, saw him calculating costs and logistics, trying to figure out how to manage a 3rd-floor walk-up with a child who couldn't yet climb stairs independently, how to afford 3 physical therapy sessions a week on a maintenance worker's salary. "What if," Maya said carefully, "there were other options? Temporarily." Carlos looked at her with the particular wariness of someone who'd learned that help often came with strings attached. What kind of options? Maya had been thinking about this for weeks, ever since the night she'd realized that Miguel's recovery was going to be measured in months, not days. Her apartment had an elevator and was 10 minutes from the hospital. She had a spare room that had been used for storage since she'd moved in 3 years ago. She had flexibility in her work schedule and health insurance that could cover additional therapy sessions. More than that, she had something she hadn't possessed in months. A sense of purpose that didn't require a uniform or a weapon or the ability to compartmentalize other people's pain. "My apartment," she said. "It's closer to the hospital, and there's an elevator. Miguel could have his own room, and Elena could stay too, if she wanted. Just until he's ready for stairs again." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. Carlos looked at Elena, who looked at Miguel, who looked at Maya with the direct gaze of someone who'd learned to read between the lines of adult conversations. "You want us to live with you?" Miguel asked. "I want you to get better, and I want to help make that happen." "But why?" This from Carlos, and Maya could hear everything he wasn't asking. "Why us? Why now? What do you want in return?" Maya thought about the convoy, about Rodriguez and Williams, about the way guilt could eat you alive if you let it. She thought about her father's hospital room and the 15-year-old girl who'd sat there feeling helpless and alone. She thought about cafeteria sandwiches and the way kindness could ricochet through time in ways you never expected. "Because," she said finally, "you're my family now, and families take care of each other." Elena reached over and took Maya's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone who'd spent the last several months learning to walk again herself. "Okay," she said simply. "Mama," Carlos started. Okay, Elena repeated more firmly. This woman has been here every day for 6 weeks. She's read more bedtime stories than most grandmothers. She knows Miguel's medication schedule better than the nurses. If she wants to help, we let her help. Carlos looked like he wanted to argue, but Miguel spoke first. Papa, it's okay. Maya's good people. You always say you can tell good people by what they do when no one's watching, but we've been watching Maya for months, and she's still here. Maya felt something shift in the room, a settling that came with decisions made and accepted. Carlos nodded slowly. Okay, he said. But temporarily, until Miguel can handle stairs. Of course, Maya agreed, though she suspected that temporarily might last longer than any of them expected. 2 days later, Maya found herself helping Miguel navigate the hallway of her apartment building while Carlos and Elena unpacked boxes in what had been her storage room and was now Miguel's temporary bedroom. It's quiet here, Miguel observed, taking careful steps with his walker. Good quiet or bad quiet? Good quiet. Like the quiet in the library, not like the quiet in the hospital at night when everyone's scared but trying not to show it. Maya showed him the living room, the kitchen, the balcony that looked out over the city. Miguel paused at the window, studying the view. You can see the hospital from here, he said. Yeah? Is that weird? No. It's good. Like we haven't gone too far away. That evening, they sat around Maya's dining room table, eating Elena's homemade soup and fresh bread from the bakery Carlos had discovered near the hospital. It was the first time Maya's apartment had held more than one person for dinner since she'd moved in. This is nice, Miguel said, looking around the table. Like a real family dinner. What do you mean, like a real family dinner? Elena asked. I mean with everyone sitting together and talking instead of eating in hospital rooms or at work or wherever we can find space. Miguel took another spoonful of soup. I like it. Maya looked around the table at Carlos, who was finally starting to look less exhausted now that he didn't have to choose between work and hospital visits. At Elena, whose color had improved dramatically since Miguel's surgery. At Miguel himself, who was becoming more like the 8-year-old he was supposed to be and less like a small adult carrying impossible burdens. Yeah, Maya said. I like it too. After dinner, Maya helped Miguel with his homework while Carlos and Elena watched the Spanish-language news in the living room. Miguel's math skills had improved significantly during his hospital stay, partly because of tutoring sessions with Maya and partly because focused attention had replaced the distracted worry that had characterized his school performance before. Maya, Miguel said, working through a word problem about trains and distances. Yeah? When I get better, when we go back to our apartment, will you still come see us? Maya looked at this boy who'd somehow become the center of her world without her noticing, who'd given her a reason to come home every day and a family to come home to. Try to keep me away, she said. Good, Miguel said, returning to his math, because I still need help with fractions and Papa's not very good at explaining them. I heard that, Carlos called from the living room. It's okay, Papa, Miguel called back. You're good at other things. Like fixing broken stuff and making me feel safe and reading bedtime stories with funny voices. Maya watched Carlos's face soften with the particular joy that comes from being seen clearly by someone you love. She thought about broken things and the different ways they could be repaired, about families that formed around necessity and choice rather than biology, about the way healing happened in increments too small to measure until you looked back and realized how far you'd traveled. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Maya sat on her balcony with a cup of tea and called her mother. How's your boy doing? Her mother asked. He's not my boy, Maya said automatically, then paused. Actually, maybe he is. A little bit. And how are you doing? Maya looked through the sliding glass door at her apartment, where 3 people who'd been strangers 4 months ago were now sleeping safely under her roof. Tomorrow, Miguel would have physical therapy. Carlos would go to work. Elena would make breakfast for everyone and reorganize Maya's kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to make any space feel like home. I'm good, Maya said, and realized she meant it. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually good." 3 months later, Maya stood in the parking lot of Miguel's elementary school, watching him walk across the playground without his walker for the first time since the accident. His gait was still careful, deliberate, but he was moving under his own power toward a group of children playing soccer during recess. "He's doing well," said Mrs. Patterson, Miguel's third-grade teacher, who had joined Maya at the fence. "His test scores have improved dramatically since he's been staying with you. More importantly, he seems happy." Settled. Maya watched Miguel join the game, not as a player his leg wasn't ready for running and kicking but as a referee, something the other children had apparently accepted without question. He called fouls with 8-year-old authority and helped settle disputes with the diplomatic skills of someone who'd learned to navigate much more serious conflicts. "He's been through a lot," Maya said. "So have you, I imagine." Maya glanced at Mrs. Patterson, surprised by the directness of the comment. "I mean," the teacher continued, "taking in a family like that, not everyone would do it. I think more people would than you'd expect, if they had the chance." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Maybe, but you did it. That's what matters." The bell rang, ending recess. Miguel waved at Maya from across the playground before joining the line of children heading back into the building. She waved back, then walked to her car, thinking about the conversation with Mrs. Patterson. Taking in a family. Is that what she'd done? Maya drove to the VA office, where she spent the afternoon reviewing disability claims and helping veterans navigate a bureaucracy that seemed designed to discourage rather than assist. It was frustrating work, but it felt meaningful in a way that military service had stopped feeling after the convoy. Here, she could see the direct impact of her efforts. A Marine getting the mental health coverage he needed. A soldier receiving proper compensation for hearing loss. A family getting help with medical bills that threatened to bankrupt them. At 5 o'clock, she left the office and drove to University Medical for Miguel's physical therapy appointment. She found him in the therapy gym, working with Sarah on balance exercises that would have been simple for any other 8-year-old but represented major victories for Miguel. "Watch this," Miguel called out when he saw her. He stood on one foot for 10 seconds without wobbling, then switched to the other foot and repeated the exercise. "Very impressive," Maya said, settling into the chair, where she'd spent so many afternoons over the past months. "Sarah says I might be ready to try some light jogging next month," Miguel said, his voice bright with possibility. "What does Dr. Kim say?" "She says we'll see, but she smiled when she said it, so I think that's good." After therapy, they drove home. Maya had stopped correcting Miguel when he called her apartment home and found Carlos and Elena in the kitchen, making dinner together with the easy coordination of people who'd learned to share space gracefully. "How did it go today?" Elena asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel before hugging Miguel. "Good. Sarah says my strength is almost back to normal." "Almost?" Carlos asked. 90%. Miguel said with the precision of someone who'd learned to track his progress in measurable increments. "Which is pretty good for someone who got smooshed by a car." "Miguel," Elena said with gentle reproach. "What? I did get smooshed? But I got unsmooshed, so it's okay." Maya laughed, and Carlos rolled his eyes with parental exasperation, but she could see the relief in his face. For weeks after the accident, Miguel had been too careful with his words, too aware of the weight his statements carried. The return of 8-year-old logic and language was a sign of healing that went deeper than bone and muscle. After dinner, they sat in the living room for what had become their evening routine. Elena watched telenovelas while working on a cross-stitch project that was slowly becoming a sampler of inspirational phrases in English and Spanish. Carlos read the newspaper and helped Miguel with homework when needed. Maya worked on VA cases or read, occasionally looking up to contribute to conversations that ranged from Miguel's upcoming book report to Elena's opinions about the dramatic choices made by telenovela characters. It was domestic in a way Maya had never experienced. Not the careful politeness of roommates or the intense intimacy of romantic relationships, but something steadier, more sustainable. The quiet contentment of people who'd chosen to build something together. "Maya?" Miguel looked up from his science worksheet. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy we're here? The question was so direct, so without adult self-consciousness, that Maya felt her breath catch. She looked around the room at Elena humming softly to herself as she stitched, at Carlos reading sports scores aloud with commentary, at Miguel himself, waiting for her answer with the patient attention of someone who'd learned that important questions deserved thoughtful responses. Yes, she said. I'm happy you're here. Good, Miguel said, returning to his worksheet. Because I'm happy we're here too, even if it's temporary. Temporary? The word hung in the air like a question mark. Miguel's physical therapy was progressing well. Dr. Kim had cleared him to walk up and down stairs in controlled settings. Carlos had been looking at ground-floor apartments in better neighborhoods, places where Elena could manage more easily, and Miguel wouldn't have to navigate 3 flights of stairs every day. The logical conclusion was approaching. The Ramirez family would find their own place, resume their independent life, and Maya would return to her quiet apartment and her solitary routines. The thought made her feel hollow in a way she hadn't experienced since the convoy. Maya? This time it was Elena who spoke. You look sad. Just thinking. About what? Maya considered deflecting, changing the subject, maintaining the boundaries that social workers and therapists had warned her about during the early days of Miguel's recovery. Don't get too attached. Don't blur the lines between helper and family. Remember that this is temporary. But boundaries, Maya had learned, were often just another word for walls. About what happens next, she said, when Miguel is fully recovered and you don't need to be close to the hospital anymore. Carlos looked up from his newspaper. Elena set down her cross-stitch. Miguel stopped pretending to focus on his homework. We've been talking about that, Carlos said carefully. And we were wondering, Elena said, what you thought about making this permanent. Maya felt the world shift slightly, like the moment when a camera lens finds its focus and everything becomes clear. Permanent how? Like a family, Miguel said, with the straightforward honesty that adults spent years learning to complicate. Like we all live together and take care of each other and eat dinner at the same table and help with homework and watch movies on Sundays. Miguel has been very persuasive in his arguments, Carlos said with a small smile. But we wanted to make sure you felt the same way before we said anything official. Maya looked at these 3 people who'd transformed her life without asking permission, who'd given her purpose and belonging and the kind of daily joy she'd forgotten was possible. I think, she said slowly, that I've been hoping you'd ask. Miguel whooped and abandoned his homework to hug her. Elena wiped away tears that had appeared without warning. Carlos nodded with the satisfaction of someone who'd been reading the situation correctly but wanted to be sure. So, we're really going to be a family? Miguel asked, his voice slightly muffled against Maya's shoulder. We already are a family, Maya said. Now we're just making it official. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Maya sat on her balcony and thought about the distance between the hospital and her apartment building. 6 months ago, that distance had represented safety, separation from other people's pain. Now it represented something else entirely, the space between who she'd been and who she was becoming. She thought about Rodriguez and Williams, about the convoy and the bomb, and the way survivor's guilt could eat you alive if you let it. She thought about her father's hospital room and a 15-year-old girl who'd believed that grief was something you carried alone. She thought about a cafeteria sandwich and a hungry child, and the way small acts of kindness could ricochet through time in ways you never expected. Mostly, she thought about tomorrow. Miguel had a math test he was actually prepared for. Elena had a doctor's appointment that was routine rather than urgent. Carlos had been promoted to shift supervisor, a recognition of his quiet competence and reliability. Maya had a veterans benefits seminar to present and a family to come home to afterward. She thought about the phone call that had changed everything, about Carlos's voice tight with panic and the way fear could transform into love if you were brave enough to let it. She thought about going home, and realized that home wasn't a place anymore, but a collection of people who'd chosen each other across the space between strangers and family, between surviving and living, between who you were and who you could become, when someone believed in your capacity for both strength and tenderness. Maya finished her tea, turned off the balcony light, and went inside to her family. In the morning, there would be breakfast and homework, and the ordinary miracles of people taking care of each other. There would be Miguel's laugh and Elena's wisdom and Carlos's quiet strength. There would be the sound of voices filling spaces that had been too quiet for too long. There would be home,